Welcome to the New England Real Estate Journal, Maine New Development and Construction webinar. I'd like to thank our sponsors for today: Margol DeStefano Architects, U.S. Pavement Services, NorthMarq, and Inspired Technology. This is me. I'm Rick Kaplan. I'm the host of the NEREJ NYREJ podcast. You can find on Apple Podcast, you can find on Spotify, Amazon Music, and our website. Here is our list of speakers: MChase from NorthMarq, Jonathan Rizzon, the Boulos Co, and Mason Rowell from Landry French Construction. I know I said the Boulos Company, and I always say the Boulos Company, but it's the Boulos Company, right?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So we are going to start our panel. And again, I'm going to introduce all of you again. And if you could just give me, or the audience, a quick or short bio on yourself and maybe a little on your company, that would be great. I'm going to start with MChase from NorthMarq.
Rick, thank you for having me this morning. I really appreciate it. My name is MChase. I'm a commercial mortgage banker with NorthMarq. I'm a managing director of our Boston regional office, where we have a team of 8 people helping clients with debt and equity placements on their investment real estate. NorthMarq is the largest privately owned commercial capital intermediary in the country, headquartered in Minneapolis with 36 offices nationwide. We're a direct lender for Fannie, Freddie, and FHA for multifamily properties. We have correspondent relationships with over 50 life insurance companies and pension funds. And we also maintain relationships with all of the local, regional, national banks, private debt funds, all the sources of capital, you name it. We try to keep our finger on the pulse of the market to help our clients, help our clients structure the right capital for their needs. So thank you again for having me this morning.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Now we'll move on to Mason Rowell of Landry French Construction.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. I'd like to echo Michael's sentiment. Appreciate the opportunity to spend some time together this morning. Again, Mason Rowell, Director of Pre-Construction at Landry French. As such, responsible for overseeing all the pre-construction efforts our company oversees and undertakes. Landry French, a little bit about Landry French. We're a Scarborough, Maine-based organization, construction management firm. Have about 70 construction management professionals working on projects throughout Maine, New Hampshire, and northern New England.
Great. Thank you, Mason. And now Jonathan Rizzon from the Boulos Company.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, John Rizzo here. I'm a partner with the Boulos Company. We are the largest brokerage company in northern New England, with offices here in Portland, Maine, Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh, we just lost you there for a second, John. Oh.
New Hampshire.
Oh, you froze up there for a little.
Can you hear me again?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Perfect. So we're the largest brokerage company in northern New England, with offices in Portland, Maine, where I am today, Manchester, New Hampshire, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So thanks again for having us.
Great. Thank you, John. And now we're going to move on to our questions for the panel. And this is very casual type of questioning, and anyone that is, excuse me, we've been having allergy problems for the past 3 weeks, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to start with John. You're seeing many parts of the state which are seeing growth in new development and many construction projects. Can you tell us what you're finding and why that is happening? What's the magic sauce that Maine is offering?
Yeah, no. So I think it's interesting. A few years ago, pre-COVID, we saw some decent office development happening on the peninsula, on primarily the eastern waterfront. Obviously, COVID slowed that piece down, but redirected it towards industrial and multifamily, residential primarily. We've seen an influx of folks move to Maine, so that's part of the need for new housing. And then with COVID, we saw, final mile type destinations that need industrial, delivery services, logistics, etc. So the industrial front went on fire. Really, over the last 2-3 years, projects like
We're having some technical difficulties.
Project with Market Basket, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks. Sorry, a little bit of internet instability there. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, we can. It's
Okay,
cutting in
sorry
and
about
out,
that.
but
Yes. So the Downs, the project that we launched there got September 2019. That was a planned subdivision for light industrial and manufacturing use. And so the developers there created 54 individual lots that could be combined. And that was, the foresight they had was pretty incredible there, because the demand all of a sudden upticked from existing product, which was basically non-existent, to new development. And the price point between existing product, because the demand was so high, and the price point between new construction, that delta shrunk. And so people were, not only forced to do new construction because there was no existing inventory, but the price point was pretty attractive at that point in time. So we launched that September 2019. We expected it to take 10 years to sell, about 80 acres of land, and we sold it in 2. So it was pretty incredible. We've got end users like IDEX in there, Crown Forklifts. We've got some developers who bought on spec and developed buildings on spec, which was extremely successful. So it's sold out, and there's construction that has already been completed for a couple of years, and still plenty of more to come.
great. We'll talk a little more about some of those projects that you just mentioned, but I'm going to move on to Mason, because Mason is actually involved in one of the big projects in the downtown Portland area. So
Yeah, Rick, 200 Federal Street.
yeah, how's that coming along?
It's coming along well. So for those of you that aren't familiar with 201 Federal Street, it's essentially an 18-story high-rise that'll add 265 apartments to the residential capacity of the peninsula in Portland. It's a mix of studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. We worked on that on the pre-construction side for give or take 12 months. The project had been in development prior to that for a longer period of time. We broke ground give or take 9 months ago, and are on track to deliver, say, with about 15 to 16 months remaining in construction.
Okay. And Michael, right now, financing is, there's a lot of questions up in the air right now. So what do you suggest for developers starting projects in some of the major areas in Maine? What do you look at when they come to you?
It's a great question. So construction financing right now, excuse me, banks are really focused on lending to groups with great reputation, strong sponsors with good balance sheets. Of course, the project, the right location, the right asset class, particularly if it's multifamily or industrial, will certainly get close looks. But the banks, they are really very much sponsor driven. So if you're looking to put together your financing package, ideally you're going to want to come to the table with a strong balance sheet, or with a partnership group that has a strong balance sheet. The great thing about Maine right now, with all the activity, is it's a very well banked market. There are no less than 27 banks that have recently closed deals in the state, and with outside investors coming into the market, out of state investors, you're now starting to see out of state banks also coming in and playing in the market. So there's certainly still an appetite for commercial lending. There's plenty of capital out there. The lenders are wanting to get money out. They just want to make sure that they're doing it for the right projects and the right and with the right sponsors.
Great, thank you, Michael. I want to mention to anyone that is online right now, you can have, if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. Or if you just want to put your contact information in the chat box, that would be great. And that way, anyone that might want to connect with you would have your information.
Rick, I actually got a question to follow up on Michael's comment there, I guess for Michael or John. What have you guys seen kind of from a developer and team approach from strategies to kind of offset and minimize risk with all the escalation and cost increases, supply chain shortages we've seen? What kind of strategies have you seen, employed and be successful?
Jonathan?
I can jump in real quick. We've seen a little bit of a pause, people taking their breath a little bit in the last 30, 60 days. I think that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives some, the market's been so hot, gives it a little bit time to cool off, maybe breathe a little bit, and people can focus on projects that, make 100% sense. And we did see people who were getting some cheap money and jumping into deals that maybe were a little bit thin, which was interesting, but you're still making money off the project. But now it's a little bit more selective. And to piggyback on what Michael said, our clients are picking and choosing the right projects. They're picking and choosing the right lending team that they've worked with in the past to get these projects done. There's a little bit of, I think, a disconnect between buyers' expectations and sellers' expectations right now. So sellers are still thinking it was 6 months ago, but the interest rate environment has changed, completely over the last 6 months, and even the last 30 days, where it's moving so quickly. Some deals that made sense 6 months ago do not make sense now. So it's, we're seeing some deals die and or retrade, but I think that disconnect will probably get a little bit less, less of a delta in the next, call it 3 to 6 months. But Michael probably has seen the same things on his end. Mason, I'm sure you've been dealing with it on your end in terms of construction contracts and whatnot. But that's what we've been seeing from the brokerage side. Is there's been a little bit of a pause, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously we want to keep doing deals and keep growing, and Maine is still a market that is very attractive to outside capital. And by that, I mean people outside of the state of Maine who still see the yields here as attractive compared to bigger markets like Boston or New York. And so they're still deploying capital to our market, doing new construction projects, focusing on, trying to find land and doing land banks potentially for projects down the road when construction gets a little bit less crazy. So there's still deals to be done and still some really interesting projects that will happen. It's just a little bit of a pause right now.
On the capital front, there's a couple of different strategies that can be employed depending on where you are in your development cycle. If you're at the very beginning, if you're already midstream, ideally lenders, they want to have as much of the risk mitigated as possible. So can you get a guaranteed max price contract, or are those not available at this point? Can you, what kind of cost controls can you offer? The good thing about Maine and relative to other markets that Jonathan mentioned is, maybe some shorter delivery times, shorter construction times to get approval, shovel on the ground, and the metrics are still attractive as well. From a borrower side, we're seeing, certainly sponsors wanting to avoid a little bit more of the floating rate risk. Cost of caps and hedges have gone up. So if they can get a fixed rate bridge loan or a fixed rate construction loan, they're certainly trying to look at that and see what options are available in that space. But there's also right now, in general, this year is a very activist type of year. So if you have a project that's going to have energy efficiency or create some affordability, then there's a lot of grant funding available out there. There's a lot of subsidies that you could maybe try to apply for to help close that gap. right now, it's not available today, but I know the Maine legislature has already is considering adding, bringing CPACE to Maine. That's commercial property assessed clean energy, and that's a form of funding that developers will hopefully be able to tap into in the future. That can cover maybe even up to 30% of a project cost, because it's all of the energy related components of a building. So it's taking a look at those alternative financing structures or availability of capital, and maybe some grants or funding sources from the state that can help maybe close the gap and get a project over the line.
And on the construction side, a little bit further down the development timeline, but once we have something a little bit more tangible, if you will, we've seen real benefit to early release packages to get certain components of that overall project scope locked down, get work started sooner, as well as early procurement strategies. And that's really comes through just kind of a collaborative team-based approach in identifying what those items are, the risk associated with them, and ideally get things approved and bought early.
Mason, maybe you can go into that a little more since you brought it up. We'll talk a little bit about the labor market, as well as the supply chain, because I know the construction industry, they have been struggling with both of those in the past year and a half, 2 years. Well, skilled labor, a little longer than that, but since the pandemic, this the supply chain has been a major issue as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rick, on the labor front, we've been fortunate to still be delivering our projects on schedule. And I think that's a testament to just having constant communication across our project teams to essentially identify openings and availability and windows and kind of where our schedules are going to align with our subcontracting trade partners. That said, on the pre-construction and kind of development front, it's imperative that once we have a schedule and we're working towards a schedule, that we stay on track with that schedule. You can really start to see the dominoes fall if things start to slide right for a myriad of reasons, but that can definitely impact the ability on the construction side. The labor market, as you mentioned, it's very constrained. And it is so here in Maine. On a percentage basis, Maine, it's the oldest state in the country. From an age and demographic standpoint, I think we just posted our lowest unemployment percentage since the beginning of the pandemic, which was a little over 3%. And I think if you look a little bit further down in central and southern Maine, it's probably down, closer to, the low 2%. So what that means is we just need to continue to try to engage. I think I saw a number of roughly 40% of the working age population isn't engaged in the workforce. So how do we get folks more energized and get their interest into joining the workforce? One of those things that recently the state in their supplemental budget just passed a $20 million community college program that essentially is looking to entice recent high school grads. I think the years are 2020 through 2023. And this, budget allocation to the community colleges would pay for a 2-year associate's degree through a community college in the state of Maine. So hopefully that's, an avenue that folks will get not only engaged in the workplace and the market, but also, more selfishly in the trades.
Thank you, Mason. One of the things that we've seen is Portland has been very hot. There's a lot of projects that are going on in Portland. Like the Procopio company has was building a multifamily project there. The one on 200 Federal Street, and then it's actually flowing over into Westbrook with the Rock Row project. And John, you talked a little bit about that. Could you go into a little more detail on why those areas are so hot and how they are going to continue to be that hot? And,
Yeah, of
it's
course.
probably changed some of the the finance numbers as well.
Yeah, no, so the Procopio project's an interesting one. That's a 54 unit condo development over in the Bayside neighborhood, which has seen a ton of development over the last 5-6 years. The city of Portland owns 6 or 7 properties over there, and they sold them to different development teams from mixed use projects, 55 and older, affordable housing project. So that whole neighborhood has seen some growth and some crazy activity over the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously 200 federal. I think the challenge right now, and part of the reason why things are kind of overflowing out of Portland into suburban or surrounding towns and cities, is the rent control that was put in place in Portland. And so that piece of it is making projects a little bit more difficult to paper. So you've got construction costs that are rising, and then you also have limited growth from a rent standpoint. So people are saying, okay, let's not look at Portland proper, but we still love this market. Let's look at the suburbs. Let's look at Scarborough. Let's look at Lewiston, Auburn. Let's look at Augusta. And people, because we've seen a population surge here, more people are living not only in Portland, but that kind of sprawls out into the surrounding areas. So Biddeford was just named the Great American Main Street Award, I believe it was called. Biddeford has seen incredible growth with revitalization of the mills that they had there, and those were converted into housing. Again, Lewiston, Auburn has seen some pretty great growth. Waterville with Kobe College. So it's the interest in Portland is real still, although the projects may be a little bit more limited for the time being, but it doesn't mean that developers are saying no to the area. They'll go to the surrounding areas and do projects there because they're hitting home runs with those projects as well. And so I think that just helps the market in general. It's kind of a rising tide for everyone in this area, and creates I think a little bit more sustainability as well, because you're not just focused specifically on the peninsula. You've got other areas that are growing from a residential front, and therefore more restaurants, retail, businesses that do want to be surrounding those areas as well. So, Westbrook is a perfect example. It's right on Portland's doorstep. Rock Row has kind of transitioned that area to be very desirable for investors. So we'll continue to see that, I think, and we'll continue to see outside capital flowing into.
Well, we almost got you through the whole thing, John.
Into those areas. We've seen companies from Pennsylvania, from Chicago, from California.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, as Jonathan just talked about those outside investors are bringing in outside capital sources. We're seeing banks from with national platforms coming in and lending in Maine. This is one of those times in the market where you really don't want to necessarily rely on 1 or 2 or 3 lenders. It's a time to really canvas the market and clear the market. Q1 was very strong. Q2 has been a little bit more choppy as interest rates have been more in flux, and maybe there's been a little bit of a pullback in activity. So you had a lot of lenders who started off the year very strong. We're very happy where they are for their annual production goals already. So they're being a little bit more choosy, but you still have plenty of capital out there. You just might have to dig or search a little bit more. Jonathan mentioned rent control coming to Portland. It'll be interesting to see how that will affect things going forward. It will certainly mean developers or owners in that area will need to investigate other sorts of capital to finance their deals. Fannie and Freddie are surprisingly large lenders in the state, and they of course love affordability. It goes right to their mission-driven goals. So over time, as Portland becomes more affordable because of the rent stabilization that may be taking place, the availability of that capital could be attractive for owners and developers. Also, the state of Maine is allocating more towards low-income housing tax credits and other things to help, and also increasing development density around creating units and creating affordability.
Michael, to follow up to that real quick, Rick, if you don't mind, we've seen some, especially in the industrial sector, developers building on spec. And there was a project that I was involved in that the developer was going to build a 150,000 square foot building on spec. We found a tenant for them, basically as they broke ground, which was great. But with the cost of construction being where it is right now and some supply chain issues, do you see lenders, saying, okay, well, we'll do this project on spec, or is there some hesitation right now?
There's certainly hesitation. Whenever a deal has an uncertainty aspect to it, there's probably going to be some credit enhancement. What's the depth of the sponsor? What's their track record in being able to deliver? What's the submarket and market like? Is it tight enough that you can foresee that tenant coming in? Is there an additional deposit that's going to have to be posted, or escrow to be posted to help kind of overcome? Maybe you're not talking to your traditional bank lender at that point. There's a lot of bridge capital out there. So perhaps you're talking to an alternative capital source as well.
Yeah, that was something that I was going to bring into the conversation. Is you have I think John mentioned that you had a lot of out-of-state developers coming into the state of Maine, and that brings up a question of where is their capital funding coming from? Are they going into local local banks or local lenders, or are they bringing in their own funding from national lenders? What do you think, or what do you see, Michael?
Exactly, Rick. It's a mix. As I mentioned, Maine is very well banked. There's a lot of great banking institutions in Maine to help serve that area. But outside capital also brings in new relationships, and there are more and more lenders getting comfortable with lending in Maine. We're seeing, I saw recently a bank out of Indiana come in with an out-of-state developer, help finance a large industrial transaction there. So certainly we're seeing some Massachusetts banks certainly head up into Maine. And vice versa, Maine and New Hampshire banks heading down into Massachusetts. So certainly outside investors bring existing relationships and also working with those current relationships. And that's why it's so important to really canvass the market right now. Cost of capital for banks is a little bit of an unknown, right? Banks will tell you they got to price a certain spread over their internal cost of funds, but that's kind of behind the curtain. We don't really get to see really what is a bank's cost of capital. So if it's a strong sponsor, a good deal, good location, if you talk to 15 or so banks, there's probably one or two banks that are willing to maybe be outliers and really chase after that deal hard. So it's worth it to really get out there and canvass the market.
Now, Mason, what do you see the forecast? What do you think it looks like for the projects and the material costs, et cetera, that what's happening right now? Obviously, this COVID-19 issue is not going away as fast as everyone thought it would. Do you see these issues to become a real rising problem?
I mean, to date, we haven't been directly impacted with on any of the projects we're working on with the current interest rates, albeit they're relatively new. That trickle down effect from an overall development timeline for us is going to be a bit delayed. If and when it does happen. So, but for us, we'll have a clearer picture of that as time goes on. On the pricing front, obviously 2021, we saw pretty significant increases in overall, price point inputs to the construction market, as well as kind of bid pricing from subcontractors and vendors. I think things are moderating a bit, albeit they still will increase and have increased throughout 2022. So, right now, I mean, we have a strong project pipeline, and things are still moving and still moving forward.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the pipeline, because that's one of the things that I was going to ask, because it's so strong. Is this something that is going to keep growing? And John, Mason, Michael, you probably all might have some input in this. you know, it doesn't seem to be slowing, even though, you know, everyone's calling the gloom and doom out there. Things still keep flowing.
Yeah, I referenced it a bit earlier. I think things are still moving forward, maybe just a little bit slower right now. You know, it was such a rapid pace the last couple of years. It's almost like, okay, now everyone's taking a chance to take a deep breath. So I do think, you know, and the other thing too is, you know, a lot of good, call it land plays for multifamily development and industrial development. They've already been picked over. So you got to find those new markets and those new pockets and really dig for deals that make sense, that are very attractive, versus just, again, just, you know, throwing something out there in a spot that really doesn't make sense for your project. So I think we'll see things move forward just a little slower.
In terms of interest rates, there aren't that many projects that are ahead of schedule, but for those that were redevelopment projects and maybe are fortunate enough to be ahead of schedule, if they had a bridge loan where there was a hedge involved, a cap, then with the rise in short-term interest rates particularly, many of those hedges are in the money. So you may have a developer who, if they can get out of their bridge loan quicker than anticipated, they may be able to benefit from the financing that they placed. We're also seeing developers trying to lock rate early on their takeouts. Can they find a permanent lender who will lock rate at C of O, who will lock rate at break-even debt service cover, get them any kind of forward rate lock certainty that they can, excuse me. And again, there are some lenders out there who are still in that area, providing that opportunity as projects are wrapping up.
You know, all I've been reading about Maine is that it's such a great place to live. The air quality is great. You know, you have plenty of open areas for development. Vacationing is great in Maine. There's a lot of things that Maine has to offer, and I still am reading that there's still it's still growing as far as the population. People are still looking at Maine as a place to want to bring their families and you know, raise them in a state like Maine. So is that going to continue with the multifamily, you think? Even though, especially in the suburbs, I would think.
I think yes. You know, COVID allowed people to work remotely, and I think that's a big reason why a lot of people decided, hey, I've been wanting to do this for a while, make the move up to Maine, but my job was keeping me, you know, in Boston or New York or wherever. What I would love to see personally is a few larger companies set up, you know, whether it's their headquarters here or secondary larger offices. So when people do ultimately go back to work, which I hope people go back into the offices quicker here than we have been doing, but that would be another accelerator for the population growth, for, you know, for keeping people here after they graduate college and having the job market here that could maybe rival a bigger city. I think that's what we're lacking a little bit in terms of employment opportunities for folks, but that was a big surge. You know, COVID accelerated that quite a bit in terms of the population boom. I know several people who have moved up here from Massachusetts and elsewhere that moved here with their families, you know, younger families that want to settle here and raise their families here.
And I think, Rick, on the residential front and multifamily development, I mean, there is certainly, you know, all the points that John just mentioned have kind of exacerbated a housing shortage. And I really think that as a state and as a, you know, boil it down to the local municipalities, we really need to relook and make, you know, residential development more enticing so that we can start to kind of balance out, you know, the supply and demand, you know, kind of difference, if you will, because we have seen for sure there's a definitive housing shortage here in southern Maine.
And projects that are being built, you know, there's wait lists for people who want to get into these apartments, and there are certain areas that kind of limit the growth and want to do it smart, which obviously that's what everyone wants to do. You don't want to do it in a manner that is going to cause pressure on infrastructure and school systems or whatever it may be. So you have to do it in a smart manner. But if the demand is there, then we should keep building. Is really the bottom line, in my opinion. And Mason sees it. Michael sees it from a financing standpoint. The multifamily market is very strong, and it's fairly stable. And so, if there are people who still want to live in apartments, and even single-family residential subdivisions, then we should keep building. It's I don't think it's rocket science in that sense.
I think Maine seems to be doing a lot of great and thoughtful planning in terms of where they're going to be spending their infrastructure dollars, right? I heard recently that Maine is the only state right now that has every school and library on fiber optic connections. And over the next 7 years, they're going to be investing $300 million in providing fiber optic connections to the entire state, to every resident in the entire state. And that type of infrastructure investment is going to allow the state to continue to attract population to come there because they can work from there, work remotely if they need to. So that and the change in the density rule to allow all the single family residents to add an ADU if they want, allow for greater density if there's an affordability component. Certainly some steps in a positive direction that's going on in the state, along with many other plans that they have right now.
Well, with the growth of more people coming into the state of Maine and with families, now Michael brought up a good point. The schools, are there going to be enough schools, or are they going to start building additional schools or expanding the schools that they have? Is that something you're seeing, or is that something that is in the plan?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from a local perspective. In the town I live in, they've been weighing and looking at a consolidation, building a new kind of middle school to consolidate, I guess, elementary and middle school, just to capture what has been significant growth and, I guess you'd say, crowding in current facilities, and allow for adequate future growth. So I think, at least from my local perspective, the answer to that question is yes. That planning is ongoing, and that thought and dialogue is taking place.
Yeah, same from my front as well. There's actually a vote in November in my town to increase the budget for the school system in terms of renovating. All the school systems in my town are right in the same campus. They want to renovate all of them and perhaps grow them a little bit, but more so streamline the efficiency of what they currently have. And it's going to be a significant undertaking that will take a number of years, but I think it's probably needed. And a lot of the folks in my town who I speak with who have young children are in support of it. And I think a lot of the municipalities around Greater Portland are doing the same.
Well, that's not a bad thing that they're doing it now, because in Massachusetts, they have been redoing or rebuilding or even putting up new buildings for the schools that have been, I mean, our school system has been growing for many years, not like, what's happening in Maine. And they tore down some of these schools and they made it like a middle school combined with elementary so it's a newer concept, and it's like a campus, like you were saying. So I think that might be something that, Maine has probably looked at other states and has saw that, well, this was a good idea and this has been working well in those states. Why they haven't seen the problem we've had with the rent control, and made that go away, I don't know, because that is not sustainable at all, and it has never been. So I don't know how that still comes to, into the discussion, but so that's good. So they have a plan in place, is basically what I was trying to get at. They have a plan for the growth of the state, with not just with all these multifamily projects, but they have their infrastructure as well, which Michael was mentioning with the fiber optics and all the other things that go along with that. So where do you think we are at this point? As far as, Maine has a lot going for it. They have a lot of projects going on. Do you see something drastically changing that will stop all of that?
Well, we hope not.
Uh,
I don't think there's a full stop coming on the horizon. I think, as Jonathan said, there may be a pumping of the brakes a little bit to, and as any prudent investor, kind of just taking a lay of the land and wanting to reassess as things go along. But development cycles are so long, lead times are so long for approvals and getting the shovel in the ground and build. You have seasonality here up in the Northeast that you have to consider when you're in a construction timeline. I don't think you can ever really just stop, right? You might pump the brakes a little bit, but you're going to reassess and you're going to make a prudent decision. But ultimately, I think you're going to continue to move forward. You might have to look at your numbers and make sure that your assumptions are still working, that the rents that you're projecting are still there. Or you might have to readjust your project, or maybe change a unit mix or design. But I don't think you fully stop.
Yeah, I echo that. I talked to a developer yesterday, and his sentiment was, yeah, we're being a bit more selective, but our development timeline is 2 years. So we hope that if there is a bump here and we do go into a recession, that it's over by the time we're done. And so that's their take. Again, they're being very selective on the projects that they tackle, but they know that their timeline is such that it would probably be just fine.
I would say one of the indices that we watch is the Architectural Billing Index, which essentially is a gauge and a metric of how busy design firms are. And those have been running, in the high 50s, and how that translates to the construction side is usually that's fast forward, 9 to 12 months down the road. That's when we would start to see that effect. So currently they're running, above 50, which is good. That means folks are busy planning and designing projects, and that seems like it would bode well for the construction industry in the next 12 months.
Well, now you've also seen an increase in your cap rates and some of the cost of your land and things of that nature. So anyone that has started the process of doing a project probably 4 years ago, they should be in good shape, I would think, by the time it's completed.
Yeah,
it's like planting a tree, right, Rick?
What was that?
It's like planting a tree, right, Rick? The best time to have planted a tree was 10 years ago. The next best time is today. Kind of, maybe Maine doesn't have that long of a development cycle as Boston would, but it's kind of an analogy we would use down in Massachusetts.
But wouldn't that be more attractive to developers to come up to a place like Maine as opposed to going like New York City or Massachusetts?
I think as long as the scale, as long as the scale is there, if they can get the scale that they are used to or that they want, then 100% they'll come to Maine. It kind of piggybacks on what we were talking about before, where there are some density issues where you can't develop as much as you may want to. So that meant, I think, someone coming from out of the market who's used to doing big projects down in Massachusetts or New York and coming to Maine.
I mean, Jonathan or Mason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the real strengths of the Maine market is its stability. You can have big up and downs in some of these other metro areas, but predominantly Portland, Maine, Southern Maine has been a relatively stable market.
Yeah, totally. It's it may not see as big of an up as some of these other markets do, but it certainly doesn't see as big of a down either. So it weathers storms pretty well. During 2008, the market was fairly stable. You did see some people who maybe got a little bit over their heads, but for the most part, it stayed pretty stable the entire time through the recession of that time. So I agree with you.
Hey, John, have you seen kind of on the front end, just given like development timeline for new construction, have you seen folks essentially just push pause due to the overall timeline, and then how have they pivoted or reacted from there?
It's a great question. I think the issue that we see mainly on, I'll focus on industrial in particular because it's such a tight market. You've got less than 2% vacancy rate right now. So if someone is looking to expand or come into the market, new construction is the only way to go. It's timing. So tenants aren't looking out 12, 18 months. They're looking 6 months out. And so they can't wait for new construction, although it's the only route that they really can go. So what we're trying to do is educate tenants that you need to be planning for 18 months out, 2 years out, because otherwise you may not have any options. And that could work today, and that's fine, but it's going to limit your growth. So, if you are, cranking away with business and you need 50,000 square feet more, it doesn't exist. You can't find that in our market right now. And so new construction is the only way, but that timeline, as you know, with the supply chain demands and just an overall approval process, it takes time. So that's, if we had more tenants in the market that looked, out that timeline, 12, 18 months, then I think more projects would actually happen. But that's the biggest thing that we see in terms of getting deals done from a new construction standpoint.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that came in. Before we get to that, I want to ask, and John or Mason, you might know the answer to this or have an idea. What do you think is going to be the next hot area in Maine for a developer to go to or look at?
I still see Saco Biddeford having some really good opportunities there. You've got the Downeaster that goes from Boston right there to in between the two cities there. So there's plenty of projects that are going on there right now, but there's more that can happen, I believe. It doesn't need to be right downtown Saco Biddeford. It can be a little bit more on the outskirts where there's some more land. So there's some more meat on that bone in that market for sure.
And what about the mid-coast and Brunswick in that area?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Brunswick, you've got Brunswick Landing. You've got the naval station there that has been redeveloped. You've got businesses looking there. It's not that far from Portland. It's an easy drive. Beautiful area. Gets you up north a little bit more. Talking about work-life balance and why people like moving to Maine. So I do think that Brunswick has some more potential. It hasn't taken off as much as I thought it would, but it doesn't mean that there's no legs there. Further up the mid-coast, I think it's a little bit more limited. You might see some more housing projects up there, but from a business standpoint, I think Brunswick, it's not the end of the line, but it's certainly up there. But again, you've got Bowdoin College there. You've got some really cool projects that have happened over the last 5 years in Brunswick. And I think it's attractive for investors to again potentially land bank up there and figure out what to do if they can find land at decent basis.
I think, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, if you have local ordinance such as rent stabilization within a certain area, it kind of pushes certain things out to the periphery of that area, right? So if you can't build in downtown Portland because of rent stabilization, then you're going to go to the community next door.
And one thing that John just brought up is that the Downeaster, the rail system going from, actually it's from Boston. Does it go from Boston or does it go from Rhode Island all the way up into, well, actually you can get on the train from in Rhode Island and get on the Downeaster in North Station and travel all the way up to the coast of Maine. Yeah. Which is a beautiful ride. I've done it many times. It's a great way to travel up to Maine. The scenery is beautiful. It's a nice ride. So they have that transportation, and it's not that long a ride. you know, especially from North Station into like Portland. It's
No, it's easy. I know some folks who have moved up here from Boston. They still go back to Boston 2-3 days a week, and they take the Downeaster. And so it's you know, if I'm going to a Celtics game, I'm taking the Downeaster. It's perfect.
well, you'd have to go to Miami now. But but that's another point. You can take a flight right out of Portland. So they have it's an international airport, isn't it?
It is.
International jetport
Jetport, yeah.
with flights to Canada.
Yeah, so I mean that you can actually go to Miami to watch the game from Portland. You know, so that those are things that I don't know if people even realize those things when they're thinking about Maine.
You know, I can speak from experience. I'm from Massachusetts originally, and my wife and I moved up to Maine for, you know, quality of life, and we really love it up here. I had friends who had never been to Maine. You know, Maine is not far away. You know, it's not that far from Massachusetts, but they never ventured up to Portland, and they come into Portland and they see the city and they say, wow, it's got a big city feel, but it's easy to navigate. It's, you know, it's got all these amazing restaurants. It's got beautiful views. And so it was a little hidden gem. I don't think it's much of a hidden gem anymore. You know, a lot of people have eyes on it, but it's interesting the amount of people who just didn't really think of it.
And I can understand that because, you know, when you say Maine to anyone that is from outside of New England, the first thing they think of, cold, you know, cold, a lot of snow. But the coast and the lake regions are absolutely gorgeous. So
I was going to say lobster.
Lobster. Now you're talking like me, Michael. You know, that's I do love that we have all those things to offer along the, you know, the whole New England coast. But Maine has, like you were saying, Portland, a lot of great restaurants, but the whole coast has a lot of great restaurants that and beautiful views of either the ocean, and like I said, you can go inland with the lake regions. It's very nice. I would consider living in Maine myself.
And so kind of piggybacking on that, you know, I've actually talked to developers. I've spoken to developers who want to develop in Maine just because they like coming here and they like visiting it. And so they'll do a project here because it gives them an excuse to come to Maine. And so it's, you know, it's people want to do projects where they like to travel, you know, myself included. So I think that'll continue.
Yeah, and maybe someday the Celtics will move to Maine to play. You know, no. You can get the Patriots and the Celtics and the Red Sox. Well, you got the what is it? The not the Red Sox.
Get a Sea Dogs.
The Sea Dogs, yeah. So, and where's their stadium?
It's in Portland. It's just off the peninsula. It's a beautiful stadium. They do a great job there. It's right next to the exit where you get off for downtown Portland.
Okay. Well, now we got 3 questions, and one is for me. Mr. Kaplan, now I'm impressed. Will there be a recording available for later accessibility? Yes, there will be. Okay, that was an easy one. Now I'm going to get into the more difficult questions that you guys can answer. How do developers overcome anti-growth ordinances, movements in communities like Scarborough, Cape Elizabeth, Cumberland, and even Portland?
That is a hard one. It's not easy. You know, you need support, I think, from the members of the community. First and foremost, you need people to reach out to the town council, make their opinions heard that this is what they want. And not everyone's going to want that, of course. You know, it's not for everyone, this type of growth. But I I think that's going to be the biggest thing is, understanding who you're developing for, which is the members of the community, and what do they want, and let their voices be heard. So that's, I think, a big step to it.
John was the only one that wanted to step into that. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo John's sentiment. I think you hit the nail on the head that you got to be involved kind of at a local grassroots level to understand what the folks locally are really looking for and develop accordingly.
Okay. So when you're talking about the ordinances and things of that nature, would you suggest that they look for a local real estate attorney that deals with a lot of those issues, and a local brokerage, because they would know exactly who and what to do to get these projects done?
I think you need a full team almost. You need a development team, you need a financing team, you need a brokerage team, architects, kind of the whole gamut, where that'll give you the best opportunity to make your case for any type of development period, let alone something to overcome any type of growth restrictions.
Okay. And now we'll go on to the next question. This is from Corey Fellows. To what extent do the panelists feel that local zoning regs, especially in suburban areas, are constraining further housing development, including multifamily? There's a strong tradition of local control in Maine, and recent state legislative efforts to give a bigger regulatory role to the state were defeated. I'm not sure if you followed that, but I think
it sounds like a similar question to the last one.
Well, yeah, it does seem a little similar. It's just they're talking, on the political side of things. I don't know how you defeat that, unless you get the communities involved in that.
I think echoing what Jonathan and Mason have already said, you need a good development team. If you've got good local people who you're working with, you have to understand, what is your project doing? How is it going to enhance the community it's going into, and how can you sell that to the community and to the local planning board? Are you going to be bringing affordability? Are you going to be bringing energy efficiency? Are you going to be enhancing that community in some way with your development? And try to get the locals on your side. I mean, one of the positives and one of the negatives is the planning board meetings now can be on Zoom, right? So it's not the same 6 people now, but anybody can join and raise their hand. So it's
right.
Both good and bad, but you still can manage that process. There are still ways, relationships, kind of what real estate is all about, relationships.
Well, I think we said everything we need to say about Maine. I don't think we left anything out. So the overall that I get from this whole discussion is that Maine is a great place for new development, and anyone that is interested should consider talking with John or Mason or Michael. And the idea of new development is still alive, and Maine has a lot to offer for that. So please reach out to any one of them, and if anyone wants their contact information, they can contact me, or you can go to NorthMarq Boston and you'll find Michael Chase's information, or you can go to Landry French Construction, and I'm sure Mason's information is there. And if you want to go to the Boulos company, you can find Jonathan Rizzon. And I want to thank you all for attending. I want to thank our speakers for today. And before we go, I also want to thank our sponsors again, that participated or are sponsoring this event for us. And it is Margot DeStefano Architects, U.S. Pavement Services, Inc., NorthMarq, and Inspired Technology. I want to thank you all, and I want to wish you all a pleasant afternoon and a happy Memorial Day.
Same to you,
Thank you
Rick.
very
Thank you.
much, everybody.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.